All right, so today on Ben Clymer Presents, we are presenting the Porsche lifestyle with none other than Ferdi Porsche.
What's up?
So,
Pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. So I would say if there's somebody that understands what the Porsche lifestyle means, it's you.
I mean, I've got introduced to it at a very young age. We used to spend almost every summer holiday somewhere where my dad could combine it with a Porsche parade or a club or a dealer to visit. So this whole nerdiness about the brand and the excitement around it and just understanding how involved people are with it and how they make it their own and how it's generational and how it's always like a father and son or a daughter, and it's like almost always the whole family is involved.
Right.
So I got introduced to this pretty at an early age, and at one point I said, okay, I probably have to know more about these things as well because you obviously pick up things, but when I got older, people expected me to know what car this is and what it does, etc. And I think at that point it was already way too late anyways, and I was infected already.
Yeah, and I think for the readers and listeners at home, so you guys did a Talking Watches with James Stacy, who's right behind the camera right there, about a year ago. And I think everyone was so impressed with your love for watches and kind of the great history. And I think if you're okay with it, maybe just kind of tell the viewers exactly your relationship to the Porsche legacy, who your father is, who your grandfather was, et cetera, if that's okay.
So my grandfather was Ferdi Porsche, who founded Porsche.
Right.
And my father is Wolfgang Porsche, who is the chairman of the board.
Right.
And I'm me. I do all sorts of things in the car world, and I'm an architect by trade.
Right.
But obviously, talking about watches, my uncle plays a big role.
Right.
He was the designer of the 911.
Right.
His name was also Ferdinand, so F.A.T. Porsche. And when he left the company in Stuttgart, he went out to start Porsche Design. Right. And did the first black watch in '72, and the first titanium watch. Just experimented with watches, and I think like the car, obviously took a lot of inspiration from the car. So it was the first black watch because the dial in the car, or the dash in the car, was also black and white for readability and functionality first. And I think that inspired him, and I think he was someone who always pushed for the next thing. So I think one watch wasn't even out on the market yet. He started doing the next one. Yeah. And he was a very chill guy. He lived in Zell am See. He liked hunting. He was a big nature lover and a very calm guy. I could use some of that, but
we all could.
Can't have it all.
That's right. Yeah. I think the thing that I always think about when I tell people about Porsche Design, and I own more than one Porsche Design, Chrono Ones, is that the fact that your uncle designed the 911, the 904, I think, and this watch. I think provides such a great clarity of lineage of what this product means to probably your family, but also to kind of the greater ecosystem of design. I think sometimes people don't understand the quite literal direct connection between Porsche, the automobile manufacturer, and Porsche Design. And it seems like with your kind of introduction to the world at large, I would say, it seems like there's a much greater clarity of connection between Porsche and Porsche Design. Is that purposeful?
I think it's also because because Porsche has decided to make the watches themselves nowadays again. So in the beginning it was Orfina and IWC and all these other brands who manufactured the watches for us. And since a couple of years we have our own manufacturing. It's a small place still in Solothurn in Switzerland. And I think also from the company there's more. I think they realize, okay, we have something really special there, and we should probably highlight it more and bring it back to life. And just also looking at what else is there apart from just Chrono One. There's the Compass watch, there's the Ocean, there's the Titanium one. So there's a lot of cool things in the portfolio that will probably come back over the next few years. And I'm very excited to be a part of it. I think, so in the end, I'm also a bit lucky to be there at the right time. And with Ice Race being in Cell as well. So that's the event I started 5 years ago. Yeah. Porsche Design was right around the corner. Obviously, at a race, you need a timing partner. And so I went over. I knew the guys from before because I did an internship there when I was still in my university days. Yeah.
So the relation.
So I got together.
The relationship between Porsche and Porsche Design, and again, maybe I just sometimes I find it a little bit confusing. But does Porsche own Porsche Design, or what is the exact connection? They do.
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
After my uncle passed away, the company bought it back.
Okay, got it.
And so Porsche owns Porsche Design, but it's its own entity inside. So we still have the design office in Cell, which is exactly where my uncle went after he left the company in 72 to start his own thing, because he liked Cell, he grew up there. As I said, he was a nature guy, and I think the design studio was in GQ back then. I think it was GQ, as one of the most, in 70 something, as one of the most fun and progressive design studios in the world. And you have all these pictures of like, I think 5 or 6, 7 guys standing there and like just having the best time. I think they did all sorts of things. I think they were working like 4 days a week only. And they were, I think they really had a good time back then.
Right.
Obviously building models and everything in this little studio there.
Yeah. So what were some of the things that maybe your uncle or your family is kind of most proud of from Porsche Design beyond the watch?
I think beyond the watch, so he basically looked at objects, whatever they were, and tried to make them better in a way. So there's obviously also always a personal connection to him. So for example, he loved smoking pipe. So there's a pipe that he designed that is actually also really cool and also has a connection to the car. Then there's the sunglasses, which I'm a big fan of. I know that Kim Kardashian wears them all the time, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But originally Yoko Ono made them famous. It's the face shield ones. But there's also one where you can change change or super easily change the glasses, the shades basically, for whatever situation you're in. And also, I don't know, there's skiing gear as well. Also with Oakley, I think back in the day. So there's a lot of cool stuff that is in the archives and that I think we will bring back in the next years.
Yeah, when I was 18 years old, this is a true story. I've never smoked cigarettes in my life. Like, it's just not something I did. But I loved Porsche Design titanium lighters. And I used to buy them on eBay, of all places, when I was like 18, 19 years old, all the time. I had like probably 5 of them at one point. I just thought they were like they were not super expensive and they were really beautiful things. And I still have a few of them now. And it's amazing, like when you look through the Porsche Design catalog, so many little objects like that like, at least in my case, like wasn't necessary at all. Like I didn't need a lighter, but like I just thought it was such a cool thing. It was affordable to me at the time, and it was just something I wanted to have.
Yeah, there's also the pens, and there's the shaking pen where you go like this, and then the pen comes out of its case. And there's a lot of like cool, fun, and like really well made, detail orientated things. In the catalog.
And so the watch that you're wearing here is a special edition of the Chrono One.
Yes.
Can we talk about this one?
Yeah, we can.
So what is it?
I mean, so it's a prototype.
Okay.
It will come out at the end of this year.
Okay.
It's the re-edition of the military. So back in the days of the chrono, there was another or a part of the chronographs were made specifically for the military. So there's for the German military, for the U.S. Army, for UAE Air Force, literally for almost every military on the planet. I think because obviously functionality and readability was so well or so good, that's why it got adapted, obviously. And one of the most famous ones is the U.S. Air Force Tiger military edition, which had like a little shouting tiger in at 4:00, and this is the re-edition of that. But it's a little marmot, it's a little mankai for our hut on Großglockner, which is like Großglockner is one of the best driving roads in Europe. It was built back then because the Austrian emperor wanted a road to the highest mountain of Austria. Back in the day.
Yeah, of course.
That's how it would go. And it's literally one of the best driving roads. And my grandfather used to test cars there, so there's also a connection to our family. That's how he discovered Cell, because Porsche back then was in Gmünd in Carinthia on the other side of Großglockner. And while testing brakes and how the car maneuvers on the road, he would discover Cell. And so I think it's a kind of a cool nod nowadays to the new utility, as we call it now.
Yeah. And so tell us a little bit about kind of your day job, so to speak, with the ice race and as an architect.
Yeah. So I always had a passion for architecture. I was kind of thinking, do I do product design or architecture? But in the end, I went for architecture because I liked the scale a lot. And I liked that you could influence spaces and places and people. And I really liked my studies as well. I studied in Vienna, met a bunch of cool people, and we have an office now in Vienna as well, where 10 people work on all sorts of projects, from a little bar that has the best cocktails in Vienna, I think, all the way to a lung practice that we build now with 2 apartments on top, etc. So there's also now our first project in the States, and then by the side in the same office, I run Ice Race. actually it's F.A.T International now, but it used to start out as ice race. It was more of a passion project back then. So they had the original ice races on the frozen lake in Celle from the 50s to the 70s.
Right.
And I just, when I heard about that first and saw pictures, I just thought the vibe of it was so cool, and that it was everything that like young people would want in a car event these days. Because it's not so much about split seconds or anything; it's more about the people and the cars in the center. But in the end, it's about the people having fun, the aesthetics of it. Everything just pops better in white. Yeah. So with a white background, and so we decided to bring it back. So literally, the first 2 years was more of a, can we do this? Can we actually get through with it and literally bring that back? And that has developed more and more, and we looked for something that would sit above that. So now we have a restaurant, our first location, we do track days, we do a bit of merch. So basically it's all that we like and enjoy. It's a bit like Hodinkee, I think, for you.
Something like that. Yeah, we're working towards that.
You guys are a bit bigger.
But please.
It's a bit like it's still something that I think people feel that it's out of enthusiasm, and I got to know so many cool people through this. Also, you guys.
Sure.
And yeah, F.A.T International was just the perfect brand for it to sit on top of it.
Yeah.
They used to be a logistics company out of France and Germany.
Sure.
So Français Allemand Transit. And they sponsored 2 Le Mans winning cars, 1994 and 1997, with a Porsche. And it just incorporates the whole coolness of 80s motorsports, and the name is good. It works in German, it works in English. So we have fun with that now.
So let's paint a word picture, so to speak, of what the ice race really is. So it's like a 550 Spider pulling people on skis behind it on a frozen lake.
Yes, that's what it was back in the days.
Right.
That's what it was back in the days, and it still is some of that. We're not on the frozen lake anymore.
Right.
We're on the airfield in Celle, just for security reasons also. But it's still 550s. It's still people being towed behind on skis, which is dangerous. I actually tore my biceps doing it once. But
what car was pulling you at the time?
A 953, so the Dakar winning 953. That was pretty epic, but it has a lot of power. So coming out of the corner, the rope that was where I was attached basically was not
tight.
It was not tight enough. So it was the typical, I don't know, water skiing accident, I think. But you have to practice what you preach. So that's ice race. It's a festival around the car, it's a cultural icon. Every brand is welcome, so it's not just 550s. It's a bit like back in the old days.
Yeah.
A festival for the people in the car world, but also for those beyond, and visually it's exciting, and yes.
So as somebody that's been, I can imagine or only assume that you've grown up around the greatest cars in the world, arguably, but when you go to the ice race, you probably see things that even you kind of have to step back and say, wow, like that is really a special thing to see.
What I think is so cool that people actually do use them in the snow.
Right.
Because I mean, growing up and also going to a lot of the clubs, but also automobile clubs like Porsche Club North America, etc. I always, and also in Germany, I think the vibe of collecting was very much taking care of the pieces, being super polite towards them in a sense. And the cool thing is at ice race, everybody brings their cars, no matter what they're worth. Right. There is something there's cheap things there's super expensive cars, but everybody treats them the way they're supposed to be treated. They use them. They drive them fast. They drive them with spike tires, and it's kind of cool to see that no matter what the car is worth, everybody gets to enjoy it, and everybody's just smiling when you have the snow in your face from the car that just drifts by.
And what car do you bring to ice race typically?
So funnily enough, I love driving the Taycan on the ice.
Interesting.
Because you have instant power all the time. You have a lot of power. You have 4-wheel drive.
Yeah.
You can take passengers, and we also have our electric ski airing class, so that's the most competitive of them all because we give all of the competitors in that class the same car, and they have the same track. So it's the only class in ice race where everybody gets the very same starting position, basically. Mm-hmm. So I enjoy that, but obviously also anything actually. Like I assume the new 911 Dakar will be amazing on ice. I can't wait to see that. Also the Sterato Lamborghini. So I'm very curious to see how many of those new off-road editions we'll see at the next ice race.
Probably a few, right?
I hope so.
Yeah. So we're going to come back to cars for sure. We'll probably end on cars just because I have so many questions to ask you about Porsche in general. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about watches. So you showed us your collection, some really kind of personally important pieces, the Cartier Crash, some really special things.
Yeah.
Has anything come into the collection since then?
Yes, I think that the newest edition the edition that came right after Talking Watches, or almost right after, was the first titanium Rolex.
You got that.
I got that because I thought the connection to Porsche design was so cool. Because my uncle did a titanium watch 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's cool that Rolex, arguably the biggest, the coolest,
Sure.
the OG in watchmaking, goes to titanium so many years later and does it in such an extreme way.
It's extreme.
I mean, the watch is, I don't really wear it that much.
It's gigantic.
When it's gigantic, yes. You can't wear it like underneath anything. It's a t-shirt watch, but it's obviously out there.
Yeah.
But I enjoy it. Every time I wear it, I'm amazed by how light it is, obviously because of that.
Yeah. Anything else in the collection these days?
Another Rolex that I got from my mom that is actually, I think, one of my favorite watches these days, I must admit. It's the Ruth Beer. Yeah.
Solid gold.
Rose gold.
Rose gold, yeah.
Yes. Such a cool watch.
Yeah.
Summer watch, obviously. I don't really wear that to work. It's more like I think I want to keep that like forever and take care of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think myself and many like me, I think would equate Rolex to Porsche in many ways, right? Like purity of design, obviously technical excellence. You see that, I presume.
I see that 100%. And I also think another connection between Rolex and Porsche is the approachability of the brand. Mm-hmm. So I think for a lot of people, the first watch that they buy if they achieve something great or if they achieve something in their career is a Rolex to manifest that. But it's also they last a long time. They have a classic that evolves and evolves and evolves. Mm-hmm. The design language evolves more than they do something completely new. And that's why I think the titanium one was so special, because it's something completely out of the box for them. Yeah. You have the same thing with the 911 evolving over 60 years now. So yeah, I see this comparison. I like it.
Any new Rolexes you have your eyes on?
Obviously the Le Mans one I would love to have. Yes.
You think you got one?
I don't know. I hope so. I think it might work out. The thing is, I mean, obviously with Porsche's history in Le Mans, it would be great to have that watch. I saw it in the wild twice already.
At Rennsport?
At Rennsport. One time at Rennsport and one time in Monza.
Yeah.
So 2 race events.
Makes
where
sense.
It belongs.
Yeah.
But I just think it's one of the coolest and most special modern Rolexes ever.
I want it bad. I really do.
I don't have a Daytona. I never had one. So,
oh man, you haven't lived.
I haven't lived apparently.
No, it's I mean, as I'm well documented, I'm a Daytona lover, and this one hit pretty hard for sure. I haven't been that excited about a new Rolex in a long time for sure. Yeah. Still don't have it, so Rolex, if you see this, give me a shout. But no, that's
same.
Yeah, for both of us. You got two friends right here. No, that's gonna be a good one. And
I was in Le Mans when it came out. Sorry.
No,
I was in Le Mans when it came out, and everybody all of a sudden was on the phone.
The race stopped.
The race stopped for like a second, and everybody was like, "Have you seen this? Oh my god!"
Yeah. And I was actually I was not in Le Mans, but I was driving a Porsche, actually, truly, with friends. That weekend up in the Catskills, which is like a mountain range up here. And pretty much the same thing happened. We all kind of pulled over and just said, okay, like we all texted everybody we knew, and including James, who's behind the camera and wrote the story on it. A great job, James, on that. That's kind of like a holy shit moment. I've talked a lot about this watch with John Mayer, who's obviously a huge Rolex fan. And it's like the watch in some ways is almost like a, George Bamford, who I'm sure you've met somewhere along the way. It almost feels like a Bamford watch from like 10 years ago, like a 2008 Bamford Daytona or something like that. But like the fact that they made it is so crazy. The fact that they did the puzzle dial, like there's so many things that Rolex is doing now that like I just can't imagine Rolex of 5 years ago doing at all. I'm looking at James here; he's nodding. I mean, just wild stuff, and the Le Mans is right up there.
Yeah, with the open case back and just the history of it.
Open case back, the red on the bezel.
To like the Paul Newman ones.
I mean, it's like that.
Everything is in there somehow.
It's bananas.
Yeah, and James's article made me even more made me want it even more.
That means I think James should get one too. Yeah, we just need 3 exactly. No, it's the. I have it on some good authority, unofficially, of course, that it's going to be a very challenging one. I mean, we know all Rolexes are hard to get, but I think this one will be particularly hard to get for most people. Which is a bummer because it's a great serially made watch, but it's a special one for sure.
I actually started out my very first proper watch was a Pepsi GMT. But at the time, I didn't dare to wear it much because I was still in school, and it never really made it on my wrist back then. Yeah. And then actually that Porsche Design changed that. So my first Chrono 1 that I got 2 years later or 1 year later from my dad, that was the one. That was the watch that actually got me into wearing watches on a daily basis. Because I felt like it had the connection to my family. Sure. It was something that like just reminded me of this whole thing, but it was not flashy at all, and nobody really knew what it was. So yeah, I think that was the advantage of that.
Makes sense.
Back in the day.
Makes sense. I think in many ways Porsche and Rolex have kind of become, I don't want to say mainstream because that's not the right connotation in my mind, but so this is a 14270, kind of early Sapphire Explorer, and this was not this one, but this reference was my first Rolex, and I remember thinking when I bought it with my own hard-earned money that like, wow, like I'd made it because I had a Rolex. It cost me $2,500 or something like that, but I was bashful about wearing it, especially back home where I'm from, which is kind of a small town upstate, and now I know people that are just so unabashed about their Rolex ownership that it's like it really has changed. Like the baseline of like luxury now is Rolex, and I think to some degree the same would be true with Porsche, with Boxster, Taycan, Cayman, Cayenne, like all the other non-911 models have made Porsche ownership kind of so much more approachable in some way.
Yeah, I think luxury is cooler if it's approachable, actually.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes those two brands so cool. Like with Porsche, it's probably something like the 912 incorporates that perfectly. Right. People would take it. It's a smaller sort of entry model. They would make it, make it a different color. Right. Make it sit lower to the ground. Make it quicker. So I think that's the beauty of Porsche as a brand, that everyone who owns one can make it their own or should make it their own.
So since you bring up the 912, I mean, this is something I've truly always wanted to know this. Like the 912, in the vintage community is constructed the poor man's Porsche. I mean, that was like the idea that, it took the motor of the 356. You obviously know what it is. And how do you view it? How does Porsche themselves view the 912?
That's a good question. I mean, I can answer that for me. I think it's it's the coolest thing. I mean, I think a lot of my dad, for example, had one before, or I think it was his first Porsche was a 912. So it was an entry car in a sense, but I think it added so much to the brand's reputation in a sense by opening the brand up to a younger audience, and an audience who could buy into the brand like this for the first time, and obviously tweak it and put different engines in at one point. So I think a lot of 912s are 911s now, and so forth.
There is kind of a whole like resto community around 912s.
Yeah.
And they're famously Jerry Seinfeld, I'm sure you've met somewhere along the way.
I met him the first time last weekend.
No kidding.
Yes.
Interesting. I feel like you would have known him for a long time for some reason.
Yeah. No, I met him at Rennsport.
How was it?
It was cool. It was together with my dad.
Yeah.
And he asked my dad what his favorite car was. My dad said the 993 Turbo S. He replied, "Too heavy." No, but it was a cool conversation. He's a very fun guy. Obviously, I grew up watching his stuff and being a fan. But it was fun talking cars with him.
He's a big 912 lover. I mean, he famously loves the 912. Thinks it's among the best cars Porsche's ever made.
His favorite car is a 550, though, apparently.
Well, he said. I mean, yeah, maybe that's the real truth. Yeah, exactly.
That's not to like.
So since we have you here, we have to ask. You grew up with access to or around all these Porsches. Your favorite Porsche?
It's difficult because I think every era has one of my favorites. So I would say modern day, I must admit I love the Taycan. I drive it on a daily basis.
It's
I
my
think
daily
it's
car.
The coolest car to drive on a daily basis. Yeah. You arrive and you're more relaxed than when you get into the car.
Somebody just said that to me. That guy said that to me less than an hour ago. Yeah.
I love it. I love the looks of it.
Yeah.
I think it's so cool on the road. And then obviously every era. Obviously, I think you're drawn towards the cars that you grow up in. So I love the 993 Turbo S that my dad talked about. It's the first car that I co-drove over 300 kph in with my dad going for like a boys trip on a weekend.
That's amazing.
I'm still sitting in the back because I was too small. It's a great car. It used to sit in the museum for a while as well.
Yeah.
So he lends it every now and then again, every now and then, and I think it's the greatest car. It has a little Christophorus thing on the dash on the side, next to the passenger seat. It smells amazing. It drives amazing. I drove the 959 the other day, and comparing this to the 993 Turbo S, it's crazy because actually the 959, obviously being a hypercar or a supercar back in the days, the 993 Turbo S is kind of the better car to drive.
I mean, it came quite a bit later.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of it was based on the 993.
Yeah.
I mean, you obviously know this. I'm saying this more for the folks over there.
Yes.
But I mean, a lot of it came from that 959.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what else do I like? 550s, obviously, because of the ice race connection, because they're great cars to drive.
Yeah.
Also 718s, just because it's the next generation of the 550, and it's only a few years between those two, but the 718 drives so much better already.
Does it really?
It's such a more like it's so much quicker.
Huh.
It's crazy. The comparison of the two cars is really crazy, and like shows how the progress like.
But they're both using the 4-cam, like effectively the same motor, obviously modified to some degree.
Yeah, I think it's first and foremost the ride and how the car handles, and the brakes are a little better, I feel. And I'm not sure, but it feels like they got more out of the engine as well.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
It revs a bit higher.
Where's the 73 RS in all this?
The 73 RS is an icon, I would say.
It's like the Paul Newman Daytona of Porsche.
It is like the Paul Newman Daytona of Porsche, for sure. I had a lot of fun in that car already. It drives amazing. It's obviously the first fast Porsche car, and I think just its significance when you consider what came in the racing because of it, or what it was, the homologation car. In the end, it was a homologation car. So, or at least some of them. I think there's 20 homologation cars of the 2.7 RS, and then obviously the RSR is coming after that, and all of the great Porsche race cars. I think it basically kickstarted that whole thing, and I think it's a usable car that feels a bit like a race car. You could daily drive it in a sense. Probably wouldn't, but
yeah, I have a small handful of friends that own them, and they always say it's the last vintage car they would sell ever. Like if they only had one vintage car, it would be a 73 RS.
That would be a good pick.
Yeah.
I maybe would go for the 964 RS instead.
European, obviously.
Bit more usable, yes.
Yeah. 964s, I think you know, I really love the short wheelbase, like 65, 67S.
Yeah.
The 964s, which I've had, really remind me of those early short wheelbase cars. I'm a big 964 fan.
Yeah.
They're really great.
I love them. Everything, like the design, the bucket seats in them. Like it's just more usable already. It works, but you sit in it in a nicer, like you sit in it nicer, so it fits your body basically. It's like wearing a good suit.
Yeah. And for some of the audience that is just getting into Porsche, you should, by the way, at retail. Where would you start on the journey? Like if you're looking at a budget of below $30,000, something like that. Boxsters, original Boxsters, maybe.
Yeah, probably original Boxsters if you have some good driving roads around the back of your house or somewhere around your area. What I also really like is the 996s. I mean, they've been a sleeper for a long time.
Yeah.
I don't know where they stand price-wise right now, but I think
maybe a little bit more, but I mean, still affordable.
A little bit more, but I think it's probably one of the coolest ways to buy into the 911. The 911 as a thing.
Yeah.
I love them. I also grew up in them. My dad had a yellow Turbo S that he sold to Michael Ballack, who was back then one of the best footballers or soccer players in Germany, which was so cool because he came collecting the car.
Yeah.
And I was the biggest Bayern. I am still a big Bayern fan, but I used to be completely nuts over it.
Yeah.
And obviously I was ready, prepared. The football was already there, and we played a little bit, which was fun.
That's amazing.
I was maybe 10 or so. It was cool.
Got it. And if you had to whittle the collection down to one, we'll say 911, what would it be? If you could only drive one 911 for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Probably a 991R.
R.
Yes. Because that one is really usable. You can drive it every day. It goes under the radar. If you don't know, you don't really know. 500 horsepower, naturally aspirated, revs to almost 9,000. Sits on the road perfectly, looks great, sounds great. Yeah, that would probably be it.
That's a good car.
What about you?
Yeah. I mean, I think if I had to use it daily, it would probably be like a C2 964.
Yeah.
Like just a car. I had a Japanese market 964 C2 that, I put the Apple CarPlay in, and I drove it into the city all the time. I used that. I drove it in the winter. that is a great car that's like not so expensive that you have to really be precious with it, but it had an airbag, which is nice, you know. That I really,
a good addition.
It is. I really like that car. I had a 991 GT3 Touring, so kind of an R, you know, R-ish, that I foolishly sold and wish I hadn't. That's the best driving car I've ever driven, inclusive of all modern Ferraris and supercars, and that's just the perfect thing. But yeah, the 964 C2 I think is it's just, as a guy that likes, like, I'm not like a speed guy. I'm much more like a back roads kind of twisty kind of vibe guy. And I think the 964 is just epic for sure. I'd actually love to find a 964 RS Touring. You know, there's not that many of them, but that's a car that I've always wanted for sure. Because the seats are the European seats are a little aggressive for me. I had the bucket seats in my GT3 Touring, and I found them just getting in and out of the city and in and out. It was a little bit tough. But yeah, the Touring 964 RS Euro would.
If the seat doesn't fit, it's always difficult to drive the cars. A friend of mine owns one of the works cars, 960 or 914 that drove the Rally Monte Carlo, and it has Gerard Larousse's seat in it. And I think the guy is tiny, and so you barely fit into the car. It's cool that it's the original seat in it. And obviously, there are so many cool things with the car. So, for example, there's a wooden like pick to like get rid of the snow in the tires if it like collects in there, like literally in the back of the car. There are so many, like, that's a great car.
That's crazy. God, I like, honestly, I could just ask you about Porsches all day long, but I won't do that for your sake. I mean, going through life, you know, as kind of a, you know, really the physical embodiment of, you know, a legendary brand. Is it something that you struggle with in any way? Is there a pressure on you that you feel sometimes that is challenging, or is it all fun and games?
In school, I found it a bit challenging every now and then, because obviously growing up, you don't really know so much, you don't even recognize that there is like a significance to it so much.
Right.
But in school, growing up, like maybe from like 10, 11, 12 at that age, you kind of realize that the teachers actually were kind of different. And so there was always a bit of a feeling that I have to behave and like I have to be more proper than others maybe, but in a sense I try to like get rid of that, and my parents were also always really cool, telling me that I should do what I like, and that if I find something that I like, I will probably gonna be good at it. And so I think you have to like get rid of that and see yourself. I see myself as Ferdi, and like so it's cool to have that last name, obviously, and it's a like the heritage of the brand is so cool, but there is, I think, more of a like it probably teaches you a lot of things on like how to be your own person, and otherwise I assume that there would be a lot of pressure, or I can see how there would be pressure.
I mean,
I try to like just push it away.
I understand. I mean, I can imagine. I mean, you're a very, in a loving way, like a normal, down to earth person, and I think that's really admirable. I mean, I can imagine, again, without knowing your family really, that there might appear to be pressure from our vantage point as outsiders, but it seems like you've dealt with it, you know, kind of very well. Is there a plan for you to get more involved with the business, or is that kind of another thing for down the road?
I'm in the board now of Porsche Lifestyle Group, which I think is a good fit. So obviously I care about architecture, I care about design. I worked at Porsche Design for a while, so I think that's a good fit. I mean, obviously, if there is something cool to do, I'd be more than happy to. But I will continue to keep doing the things that I like. I will for sure not say goodbye to architecture, because I think it's a cool place to be, and I love the office. And so let's see where the road takes me in that regard.
Amazing. Ferdi Porsche, not Porsche.
Porsche Ben Clymer.
Get that right. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. Can't thank you enough, truly. This was a treat.
Thank you very much.